Hey, hello to all of you out there. We are in our latest installment of Talking Marijuana. We're your hosts. I'm Barry Kramer. I am the patient operator of California Patients Alliance. We're a GLACA-accredited dispensary in Los Angeles on Melrose. Come and visit us if you're a patient.
Hi, my name is Yami Bolaños, and I'm the patient operator for Pure Life Alternative Wellness Center, which is now located in Hollywood, California, on DeLong Pre. We are also a fully accredited dispensary, a collective, and I'm also the president and founder of GLACA, the Greater Los Angeles Collectives Alliance, setting the standard for medical marijuana in Los Angeles since 2006. And with us on Skype,
hello, everybody. I'm Don Duncan, the California Director of Americans for Safe Access.
Doing his work in Sacramento, which is why he's with us on Skype today.
Yes, joining you from the cosmopolitan mecca of Sacramento.
And in studio, we have a guest host. He's been with us three times already on Talking Marijuana. This is Aaron Justice from Buds and Roses, an award-winning, also fully accredited GLACA dispensary here in the Los Angeles area. Where are you located now?
13047 Ventura Boulevard, 2 blocks east of where we used to be.
2 blocks east of where you...
we've all moved.
That's
I don't know
Right.
that in Los Angeles, Measure M passed in May, and that meant that all of us that could relocate and stay alive had to relocate. So a vast majority of us have relocated.
We did it.
We did it.
Right.
We did it.
And you were good, right?
Yeah, I was good. I was good where I was.
Good.
I didn't have to move. The regulations, though, really made a shuffle here in Los Angeles. I have to say, I still don't know who is with what dispensary and where that dispensary might
located,
be. I'm waiting for the list, if there ever is one of which dispensaries are operating legitimately. Hey, we're all here, dispensary operators. Don, you were with LAPCG here in Los Angeles, so we're all dispensary operators.
In West Hollywood.
In West Hollywood, of course, the privileged few.
We're very proud of our status as a microcosm in the middle of LA.
Yeah.
We don't see much news about what's going on in LA. We were very much on that, talking about it a lot here at Talking Marijuana because it affects all of us so much. But I have to say, we haven't heard much in the news lately. Everything seems pretty quiet here in Los Angeles. Anybody
I think everyone's scrambling around. I, for instance, registered my address one day before the deadline. I closed my shop on La Cienega, as the law said to do, on the 17th of December, and we opened up again on the 26th of December. But we're going through growing pains. I mean, just move your business 5 miles, because that's how far I had to move my business. You're so busy trying to get stuff set up and do it correctly that there's no time for news, you know?
Right.
You're making your own news.
And you're only about...
Well,
go ahead, Don,
people
please.
don't realize how disruptive it is to move any business.
Yeah.
If it was a shoe store, that would be disruptive, but especially a business that serves sick people and has a clientele that's counting on them. You know, they've become accustomed to where these collectives were, and so if they have to be moved, if that's how it is, so be it. But I hope the city appreciates the tremendous sacrifices that collective and cooperative operators in Los Angeles are making to be legal.
Well, Don, I think the city definitely appreciates medical marijuana patients and medical marijuana providers. They've shown that so many times in the past, sincerely.
We're alive in LA because our spirit said we wouldn't die. It had nothing to do with the city council or the government of the city of this city. It was all because we wanted it to be.
I got Yami riled up. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
My computer has a facetious meter that's just really going on.
Did you get one of those facetious meters? I was looking at that.
Came with my laptop.
I tried to order one online, and they laughed at me.
They didn't think you were being serious.
I was facetious.
Well, it is difficult, the massive, all the work we've had to do and everything to move and the cost we've incurred, especially when the illegal shop that's like 3 doors down from your old shop that you know is not compliant is still operating and operating in the hours they want to operate. with the sign, everything that we want to do.
taxes.
And
Just to clear this up,
Yeah.
the ordinance says that you can only operate your shops between 10 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock at night. But there's illegal shops in the city of Los Angeles that operate 24 hours, that operate till 3 o'clock in the morning, and they advertise it. Hundreds of them
of
that are
illegal
doing that.
shops.
And I'm worried that I'm going to be considered non-compliant if I leave my green cross on it by 8:01 p.m.
Yeah,
because that's the
exactly.
rules. And I'm worrying about those things, and they're like, idiot, what are you doing?
It's like 8:05, close the door, shut off the light.
Right,
But
right.
next door, the illegal dispensary
Yep.
runs till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
It's hard for us. It's been
Well,
very
and
difficult.
especially when you look at somewhere like Colorado and all the attention and all the media and all the positivity, and Los Angeles could have had that years ago, and they're still wanting to fight what could be such a good thing. And it's
Well, we've had a problem and let's branch that out from Los Angeles to Greater California. We were the first ones on the block, and we've had all these years, 18 years now since we passed medical marijuana, to have our state do some sort of state regulation so that we're all following rules. Like Colorado. In Colorado, what they do in Denver is the same thing that they do in Colorado Springs, is the same thing that they do all the towns in Colorado, other than the banning that might be going on selectively. But they have state regulations, and so from seed to sale, marijuana is tracked, and it is an emerging model that looks pretty good to most people.
good enough to make.
And we don't have that here in California, and it is a continuing problem not only for operators and people that want to go into this business, but especially for patients. We don't have legal marijuana, so the only people getting marijuana right now in California are legal patients, and the only people suffering from the non-activity of our legislators in Sacramento, Don, light a fire, is the we've been working hard. There's been two in 2012 and 2013. They tried to pass statewide regulations, and both times it was defeated mainly due to the influence of police and law enforcement here in California.
But let's be clear, it's not rank and file police officers who are patrolling the streets, it's lobbyists who work for big, well-funded lobbyist organizations.
Right.
And that's a lot of what happens in Sacramento, and I think the other state legislatures as well, is that, everyone has a special interest. This happens on our side too, and folks, come around and advocate for their little piece, and they forget about the big picture. And so one of the things that I would love to see happen this year, we tried this very hard last year to get everyone on the same page and behind one piece of legislation, and couldn't do it. And one of the things I'd like to see is sort of an evolution of our consciousness in the medical cannabis community amongst activists, to say, you know what, this bill is not perfect, because legislation never is. The bill's not perfect, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to accept it, and maybe we'll work to improve it, or I'll just compromise, because that's how things get done, and that's what our opponents do very well, is they build coalitions against us by compromising.
Don't you think?
Don't you
think we sort of have a? I mean, speaking to that, I feel like we have a deep-seated problem here in the state of California, mainly because we have had legal marijuana for medical patients for so long, and that fight was a long fight before it became legal. So we're talking over 20 years of advocacy, and in those 20 years, we've had so many different groups of advocates. And at this point, when we should be coming together to compromise, we have splintered groups that will not give on the things that they've wanted legitimately for over 20 years.
It's so interesting.
There's really a twofold problem there. One is, of course, that people have a hard time uniting, because there's some ego involved, there's some pride involved, but we also have a problem because we've sort of grown into this new phase of medical cannabis advocacy, in which instead of the patients in Sacramento pleading their case to lawmakers, now we have paid lobbyists who are in the mix, and they're only advocating for their client and whatever their client wants. And so if their client has some crazy off-the-wall proposal to bring in, they're there to beat that drum, and it's really confusing for lawmakers, and they lump us together. I was actually talking with a lobbyist for law enforcement recently in Sacramento, trying to set up an appointment, maybe make something happen, and he kept saying, well, you people always do this, and you people always do that, and you people so forth, and it dawned on me, they lump us all together. So when we have like one person in Sacramento doing something crazy, or in Los Angeles or Berkeley or anywhere else, everyone paints us with the same brush. And so
Right.
it really matters how we comport ourselves because it reflects on everyone.
So that seems to be a problem, and I have to say it's been a problem pretty much since I've been involved in this industry here.
Yes.
Is the disparate, sometimes egos, sometimes just points of view and hardened, fast sticking to what they originally wanted. Maybe that was 20 years ago that they wanted something, but that doesn't make sense
This
now
disparity-
because we need to move forward into what we're dealing with today, not 20 years ago.
And it's not more evident than it is in California that there's 4 initiatives to legalize. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Oh my gosh,
ridiculous.
yeah.
It's like
That is confusing things,
it's
isn't it? I
confusing.
mean,
It's really confusing. And for me, there's 3 initiatives on board that will take away D, which is how we exist in Los Angeles. And it's interesting to me that after we've had like a voter initiative like we did in Los Angeles for D, that 63% of the people voted it in, that now they've come back through the back door and they've organized and put an initiative on the ballot, or trying to, that totally, completely takes away D.
But see,
And so you
but let's
eliminate D,
just
you know,
branch
it's-
this discussion out a little bit. What if one of those initiative gets on to the ballot? Then that's the point when we, as advocates that have been advocating for D for however many years we did, and paid $1.5 million to get it passed here in Los Angeles, and it will be overridden by the state legislation. We can't just stand in the way of state legislation. We have to come to compromise too. So that's what I'm talking about. And I'm wondering, do we have hope that our organizations can make these personal sacrifices for things that they want and make a compromise to move forward?
I don't have a lot of hope in that, but some.
I don't
I'll
either.
tell you, there are 2 things here. One's the initiative process. We have these 4 initiatives on the ballot. Once those have been submitted to the Secretary of State, they can't be changed. You'd have to start the whole process over. And so in that regard, you have to make a decision. Will I stand by Measure D or let it go for the greater good, assuming that is the greater good? And I'm not necessarily persuaded it is. But if you come to that conclusion, then of course you'd have to stand aside. But with state legislation, there's always a chance to get in there and influence it. We don't always succeed, but last year there was a bill in the state legislature in California called AB 604. And the folks in Los Angeles were very concerned, the city council and the city attorney was very concerned that it would interfere with Measure D in Los Angeles. And so at the last minute, they came up with an amendment. They went to Sacramento and they lobbied and they got an amendment added that's actually going to be very useful for cities and counties moving forward. Because whether it's in California or any of the other legal states, there are 2 levels of government that we have to deal with. There's state government that has one set of interests, and then you've got your local government, your cities and counties. And they need to be heard too. This past week I was actually at a committee meeting for the League of Cities, which is a organization that represents the interests of cities in the state
Highly
legislature.
influential organization.
Very powerful, yes. As you can imagine, almost every city in the state participates, so they have a lot of connections. And generally speaking, it's an important voice because the cities do need a representation, so they don't get ignored at the state level. But they're very, very concerned about sovereignty and local control when it comes to issues like medical cannabis. And I think this is something that people in other states should have a heads up on, is that if you have a state law and it's great, don't forget about the cities and counties and make sure that we're taking care of them. People need to be good neighbors and good constituents in their city and their county as well as in their state, because cities can make a lot of trouble for you if they decide they don't want your dispensary regardless of what your state law is. And I know some of the state laws do better at preempting city bans than others do, but here in California we're looking at the very real possibility that we're going to have green counties and non-green counties, some where there's medical cannabis and some where there's not. And a lot of that has to do with bad experiences that cities and counties have had with medical cannabis.
Right. Do you think that would change if we got statewide regulation, or if we
I think that
legalized
may be-
marijuana here in California?
No, I think that's going to be enshrined in statewide regulations. People like the League of Cities and many lawmakers are very committed to the idea that a city and a county will be able to ban medical marijuana if they want to, even though there's a state law. And unfortunately, our courts in this state have taken a very narrow interpretation of medical cannabis and what rights are granted. And so when it comes to distribution and cultivation, the courts are really reining us in on that. They're really painting us into a corner. And it's going to be a problem. And so our state legislation is more likely to reinforce that than reverse it. And that's, some people would say, oh, you can't support a bill that allows for bans. I'm not sure we get a choice. I think that's what we're stuck with right now in California.
It's kind of the way Washington went with their legalization, and they find that their medical program now is at real risk of being
just rolled over
into the legal program, and many rights of medical patients lost there. But it is the compromise, and I guess it will be normal if that's how things transpire. It'll be normal in Washington within a year or 2 years that people don't even think about what it was in the past. It'll just be how it goes forward.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I do know this. I think here in California, we've got some unfinished business, and I think it should be a lesson for the other states, too, to look at California, because 2 years ago, if you had told me the right to grow medical cannabis in California will be on the table for discussion, I would have said you were crazy, that personal cultivation for individual patients was absolutely sacrosanct. They could never take it away. But the courts have done that. In the 3rd Appellate District, they have said there is no right to cultivate medical cannabis if you're a patient. You don't necessarily have that right. I can't believe they said it. I don't see how they come to this conclusion, and yet that's what they're saying. And so both in California and the other states, you need to be aware that you have to be vigilant and you have to be pragmatic and you've got to be coordinated on these things, because just because you have a law doesn't mean you're going to keep a law.
Right.
Exactly. You have to protect what you have, like we have here in LA. We have D, and supposedly the city attorney's protecting D as well.
One of the other problems
just went off again.
What went on? Yeah, one of the other problems, of course, and including in statewide regulation, and it's a big topic this week, is banking. Let's take a little break, and when we come back, let's talk about banking not only here in California, but all over the country for medical marijuana and marijuana legitimate businesses. We'll see you after the break.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hey, we are back with Talking Marijuana. I'm Barry Kramer. I'm here with Yami Bolaños and Aaron Justice, and we have Don Duncan in Sacramento via Skype. And we're just having a little roundtable discussion today about items that have been in the news and that are affecting marijuana patients and legal marijuana purchasers and recreational users. So we were talking about banking. Our Attorney General of the United States came out this week and had some really interesting and new developments in the banking question here for marijuana. Let me just set the stage for people that don't know what the situation is. Federal laws prohibit, at this point, the federal government is putting pressure on banks to not do business with marijuana businesses, whether they're medical marijuana businesses or legal recreational marijuana businesses. This is causing a problem, of course, certainly in Colorado and Washington, where businesses came online January 1st and have no access to bank accounts, banking services. So we've got large stores of cash all over the country, not only in Colorado and Washington, but here in California, in Michigan, in all the legal states, they cannot do business and banking business, and it's been a big issue. And we got some word on that this week from Holder. Maybe Don, would you like to continue with that?
Yeah,
talk a little bit about it?
This whole thing about banking has really been a catch-22 for the industry of medical cannabis and for legal cannabis, because on one hand, the government's requiring us to be more and more transparent and more legitimate in business practices, and then on the other hand, the banking industry, the private banking industry, is saying, no, we won't take your money. And the reason they're doing this is because the federal government has been relatively severe recently when it comes to drug money. Some huge fines, multi-million-dollar fines against big banks and what have you. And so when the banks went to the Department of Justice and said, tell us it's okay to do business with these organizations, the federal government simply would not respond. They're just, no comment, we don't know, we're not going to help you. And so the banks did the safest thing for their profits. They simply started kicking people out. I've been a Bank of America client since I was in college. The first bank account I ever opened by myself, a freshman in college, was at Bank of America. And they just shut me down. They cut me a check and sent me on my way.
No discussion.
I have a friend
No discussion.
in Canoga Park who lost his retirement. He didn't lose his retirement account, but he'd been saving money in a retirement account for many decades. And they just cut him a check and sent it to him and said, sorry, you're out of Bank of America. So this has been a huge problem because you've got businesses that need payroll, they need to pay their taxes. Have you ever tried to pay payroll taxes without a bank account?
Or the BOE, or the BOE.
Or you can't even
The Board of
get
Equalization for
you have
sales
to-
tax,
Or
all
order.
the state tax agencies,
Just so
they're
you
not
all,
set up for
yeah,
cash.
just to, I'll give you a little personal example of that. When I go to pay my taxes, which I do every quarter, I pay all the taxes that my business is supposed to pay, but I can't pay with a check because I don't have a bank account. So I have a prepaid credit card that I need to go out or take cash, either use the prepaid credit card, but if it's over a certain amount of money, prepaid credit cards don't work. And usually tax bills are fairly high and that won't work. So that means I have to get money orders. Money orders then get mailed into the BOE, and because you're using a money order, which they don't accept as a form of payment, they want you to do it online, you get a charge, and our charges have been anywhere from $500 to $600 per tax bill extra on top of the taxes that we pay because we paid in a manner that they don't like. We paid by
Right.
money
It's
order,
a
which
big
is
mess.
perfectly legal. It's just,
It's a
it's
mess.
the
Now,
worst
Now, the good news
situation.
is, things may be changing in this. Now that we have 2 legal states, a lot of people are complaining and saying, hey, we've got all this tax revenue flowing in. This is legal under the state laws. Let them have bank accounts. And so Eric Holder, the Attorney General, has announced this past week that they are going to give banks a little coverage for accepting the legal money from businesses that are legal under state law. So that's actually a big change in policy. And, congratulations to the people who advocated very hard. I know Americans for Safe Access and a lot of the other advocacy groups were advocating. I know business owners all over the country have been calling their congressmen. And it seems to be working. It might be that we can change this policy without actually passing a bill through Congress. So we're very hopeful for that. And I want to say, take our victories where we can. We don't get many of them. So 3 cheers for Eric Holder.
We have
Yes, 3 cheers. I even had 5 bank accounts closed.
Uh.
I'm really happy that Mr. Holder came out for us instead of against us.
So it's really, do we have no specifics? They keep saying we're going to very
I know,
soon.
It's a policy statement. That's all.
So even though we have no specifics, has there been any rumors or anything about how this might come down and work for how they might clear this up? Is there any thoughts on that?
Yes and no. There's a lot of speculation, and of course, one thing that they could do is they could just give a nod to the banks. Remember, we're talking about private businesses. The banks are a private industry themselves, and they could just give a wink and a nod and say, "You guys, it's cool. Take their money." Or there could be some sort of a memo from the Department of Justice, like we have with the enforcement guidelines recently.
Right.
And of course, and then it could go all the way up to an act of Congress. Congress could actually pass a bill
Or an executive order.
legalizing
An executive order, would that be
money.
cool?
There was one introduced in the last session of Congress to do just that, to say if the business is legal under state law, then it's not a federal crime to accept that money.
Okay. What about California? We don't have state legislation. So
No,
is
we
that
don't.
going to affect
California
us
is in a
somehow?
bad way because arguably, from the federal side, none of our collectives and cooperatives are state sanctioned because we don't have a state bill. Now, Americans for Safe Access recently published a report. It's called Third Time's a Charm, and it's regarding the name is reference to the 3 memos that have been published by the Department of Justice. First, indicating tolerance, then taking it back, and now swinging back towards tolerance. The third time we hope is a charm. And we argue in that report that California does have a regulatory scheme, just not a very good one. And so, we would argue that we are regulating collectives and cooperatives because Senate Bill 420, which is Health and Safety 11362.7, sets up the barest possible framework of a state regulatory system, and then leaves it to cities and counties. and to come up with the details. And so you can certainly understand that as a state regulation program. I don't think it's a great state regulation program, but it's definitely not nothing, I guess, is what I want to say.
That's what I would wonder. Are they going to have like an application process to have a medical cannabis or a cannabis account? Or are they just going to say if you think they're involved in cannabis, then just it's okay?
Well,
I mean, because if they're not gonna,
I'm just going to speculate, but I think we're more likely to see an informal policy of tolerating us than anything in writing.
So that should make us okay.
I read a little bit
locally.
this week in some of the opinions about what Holder had mentioned, and one of the things that I read, what did it come out of? It came out of Forbes. Jacob Sullum was writing about Eric Holder's statement, and he said that, and this sort of addresses the California or Colorado, Washington, which has a regulatory system, and other states which might not have a regulatory system. I think for many weeks now, months, when they've been talking about this banking maybe coming online for marijuana businesses, I've been very much in the camp that says, well, we're not going to get it here in California because we don't have state regulations. And the federal government, the Justice Department, has been very firm, saying we're going to stay out of states that have state regulations, and those state regulations should cover these 8 points. And they have 8 points, location to children, all kinds of bare bones, 8 points that you want to have regulating. We don't have that in California. So I was nervous that, well, just because of that, we're not going to get the banking until we get the state regulations. But I've been reading just a little bit of an interpretation here, and it says, Treasury Department, it's not clear how these regulations will work or how, in the absence of new federal legislation, the Justice Department can assure banks that they won't be prosecuted for serving businesses that federal law classifies as criminal enterprises. The rules are not expected to give banks a green light to accept deposits and provide other services, but would tell prosecutors, exactly what you're saying, not to prioritize cases involving legal marijuana businesses that use banks. And to go further, it says this is a similar approach the administration has said it will take with cannabis businesses that comply with state law in Washington, Colorado, and the 18 states that allow medical but not recreational use. So to me, that gives a little bit of an open door that they might see the bigger picture that whatever business it is in whatever state, we can't have these cash collections. It's bad for public safety to not have banking available.
Handling cash like that is not safe. It's not accurate, and it opens the door for fraud. So if they want us to be legitimate, make us put that money in the bank.
Yeah. Because you figure the first week Colorado collected $5 million, or that's what they say. They made $5 million. So that was $5 million sitting around in stacks of cash all over the place.
Right.
Here, I'll date myself a little bit with this anecdote. I used to work at a movie theater when I was in college, and this was before movie theaters took credit cards. And so it was all cash. And you would not believe the hoops we had to jump through with that much cash. There were people running back and forth with envelopes tucked under their shirt from the box office to the room upstairs. There was a big floor safe where they stored it. And then at night, a big Brinks armored car came, and guys with machine guns took our cash away. That's not
how much cash was that? About how much cash would that be? Do you remember?
Not 5 million.
Well,
I don't know.
On a daily, were you guys pulling I'm just saying.
Are you deciding whether you should go into the movie business
No,
or the marijuana business?
I'm just saying that there's such huge amounts of cash being moved in the city and in the state that it's ridiculous.
And we can't use security services
like Brinks.
We can't use Brinks.
Bags of cash. I'm not talking about little bank bags. I'm talking about those big burlap locking bags from Brinks.
So why'd you get out of that business then? Well, another thing too is I think we could be safe in California because locally I think banks are accepting. It's more a problem when they send it up through corporate.
Right.
And up through corporate is going to be somewhere else, so I don't really think it's going to matter exactly where you're at. So I think hopefully this banking thing will help us here tremendously.
Well, the other
I think we're turning a corner on banking.
Yeah.
I'm confident.
And the other issue with banking that's coming out now, and I think speeding the process toward regulations for banking and allowing banking, is the ATM problem. I read a wonderful article today, the other day. It was in the Denver Post. David Migoya wrote this. ATMs in or near pot shops called called a disaster waiting to happen. And the reason for this is that federal ATM banking machines, if you are a bank with Washington, well, they're gone, right? Washington Mutual. Talk about dating yourself. Talk about dating yourself. Chase Bank or Bank of America. Their ATM machines are under federal regulations. They are checked out by federal officers, and they have a whole protocol that they have to go through. The vast majority of ATM machines are privately owned and put anywhere you want. For $2,000, you can go buy an ATM machine and stick it on the corner. You know, as you get the rights to do that, you can stick it there, and nobody, literally, I mean, in this article, it says, exacerbating the issue, there are thousands of privately owned ATMs across Colorado, but no one place, not law enforcement, not state or federal banking regulators, not even the ATM networks themselves, knows who owns them all, or for that matter, where they're located. And it is the number one way of being able to launder money is through ATM machines. And so this is just a disaster, and I think that is fueling the conversation and the knowledge on Washington's part that they have to do something about this. Could ATMs be used to launder money? Conceivably, yes. But this public policy matter for the legislature, it speaks to the overall need for banking issues to be remedied at higher federal levels, and our state has been calling for that. So that is a really interesting thing that I never really even thought of. We have an ATM machine. You know, we have it because we have no other way for our credit card patients to be able to pay for their...
Because they took the merchant services away from us as well when they closed our accounts.
Exactly. Those are federally overseen.
And you can't expect your patients sick and whatever to come in with huge amounts of cash, you know?
Well, and who carries huge amounts of cash? If you get paid by your deposit or paycheck, you don't have a wad of cash in your pocket.
Absolutely.
That's why I never have money for the meter.
So we've had a lot of movement this week also in many states. Every time I opened up my news page to read about medical marijuana, there was something new going on in Oklahoma, in Tennessee, in Georgia.
Texas.
Rick Perry of
Florida.
Texas. So
Texas.
So there's so much going on in across our country, and not even in just our country, all over the world. We've got Peru has come on board after Uruguay. They're looking at marijuana. I heard the city of Turin in Italy is starting to look at a medical. I mean, this is starting to really infect and grow all through the world, but certainly through our country. Let's take a little break and come back and talk about some of the great stories that are happening around the country here in Florida. We have a really good story. Yeah, we'll talk about some of that when we come back from the break. Let's take a little break. We'll see you on the other side.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
We are back indeed with Talking Marijuana, and we've been talking a lot of marijuana today. We're going to talk a little bit now about what's going on around the country. A lot of stories that we've been discussing here over the weeks that we've been podcasting have had some really nice addendums to them here this week. Let's start with Florida.
Yay, Florida.
A number of weeks ago, we talked about John Morgan down in Florida. He's a private, he's a lawyer, I think, and he has put anywhere from $3 to $4 million into getting an initiative onto the Florida ballot this year.
For medical marijuana.
And it was vehemently opposed by their state attorney general, Pam Bondi. She said the language was vague and unclear and would lead to, de facto legalization in Florida. And it has been up before the Supreme Court in Florida for quite a while, whether or not they're going to decide to let this language go forward and let the initiative get on the bill. Well, the first thing to get the initiative on the bill was that they needed signatures. And just about 3 days or maybe 5 days ago, Tuesday, they went over the mark of the signatures. They got over 700,000 signatures in Florida, put it on the ballot, but they were still being stopped by the Attorney General, who was fighting in the Supreme Court to get this stopped because of the language. Well, just a couple of days ago, the Florida Supreme Court rendered their verdict in this and said, I think it was a 5-4 vote, that this language was fine. It can go on the ballot, and now it will be on the ballot. And over 85% has been polling in Florida for legalization or for medical marijuana. And John Morgan, who is this businessman, the big political brouhaha behind it is that he's a supporter of Charlie Crist, who is running against the now governor Scott Walker.
Yes.
Now, Scott Walker hasn't come out, I think, for or against this, but if he wants 85% of the people not to vote for him, he better get on board with
Can we
this.
get this John Morgan got to move to California next?
Well, and he's not. John Morgan is not a pot advocate.
No.
He comes to this, and his story is from his personal experience with his family. His father and I believe his brother both used medical marijuana. His father to ease and comfort him as he was dying. And John Morgan really saw it firsthand.
He experienced it.
If he didn't, there's no way any human being would put $3 to $4 million into something, his own money and his own reputation
in Florida. And that's a big fight. That's a big.
So kudos for John Morgan.
Kudos
This guy
to the
really
Florida
fought.
Supreme Court for deciding the rights, in favor of the rights of the patients.
Right.
And I know they're going to win.
Yeah, it's going to be.
That's right.
It's going to be a happy year.
I know they're going to win. That's a really good
Miami
story.
Florida would be all over it.
So that's Florida, and that's the start in the South. Like I said, I've read articles now. Tennessee, Georgia, Oklahoma, all these states looking at
Louisiana is
Florida
looking
may be
into
the first state to legalize medical marijuana below the Mason-Dixon line.
That'd be great.
It's going to be great, and that will open a floodgate of new states to come on board. And this tide just seems to keep on turning, although clunkily and very, and there are a lot of tragedies along the way. Clunkily
Did
is
you
the
just
word.
invent that word?
I'm going to say clunkily, trademark.
Well, the other thing with California is that I think the reason why you don't see as much progress and everything here is because people have some access in the major areas in San Francisco and LA, and they're just not as motivated too. That's kind of
I think a lot of what happens in our marijuana advocacy is that we get a win and we think we've won.
Yeah.
The mentality a lot here in California for sure. People are like, oh, isn't it legal? I can go down the street. I can go down the street and go to that place that has free hits on this or that.
But
it's not legal.
It's just so much less of an industry than what it could be. I mean, when we're running around trying to get money orders and pay a vendor to order supplies with a cashier's check or a money order, I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is.
So
I think we have to remember if we want to grow this industry, we can't forget about the advocacy. And I think that's one of the problems we've had in California is that a lot of the energy and to be candid, a lot of the money that used to go into patient advocacy and legal advocacy and legislative work, it's all now going into industry building, except people, they need to remember that we're not that far along just yet. We still have to be doing this advocacy work because we could lose ground. And, the other states should take a cautionary tale from California, because the pendulum is swinging the wrong way in California. So, Florida, beware.
That's right.
And we also have momentum building up for legalization in new states in 2014. At the beginning, I would say maybe 6 months ago, we thought, once Colorado and Washington came on, it would slowly, there would be a little build on that. Nobody's waiting. I mean, we've got at least 4 states that are looking at, and this was not the case 6 months ago, at looking at legalizing in 2014, and they're really organizing, and the most organized seems to be Alaska.
Yep.
And they seem almost on a surefire road to legalize marijuana in 2014. And where it was very doubtful that California could really launch a legitimate effort in 2014, and we should probably put our resources into 2016, that has shifted somewhat, I feel. Not that it's shifted totally. I think that's still a good plan, but the momentum is so here. It is happening all across the country that we just can't sit back.
There is momentum behind 2014, and I'll say, let me cop to being wrong. I thought 2014 was dead in the water in California.
I did too.
There's a little momentum now behind it. What they don't have is much time.
Right.
Or money. Or money.
It's almost February.
It's an
gonna be
expensive
February in a few days.
Yeah.
The election's in November. There's not very much time to mount a statewide campaign. So no one who wants to be on the ballot should be dawdling right now.
I have an idea. Super Bowl ad.
Oh, God.
You mean for our
Yes, it is.
I think we're going to get a boost out of the Super Bowl, whether we buy ad space or not.
We already have huge
I think
media.
everyone's going to be stoned when they're watching it.
Well, what's different than any Super Bowl?
Well, but what's cute is that now they're even putting out recipes for Super Bowl parties. Infused marijuana.
I don't know how much more.
Snacks
I don't know how
and
much
stuff.
more normal we could get than an article in the Huffington Post that gives recipes for marijuana treats at your Super Bowl party. It's really
the Huffington Post.
it's the Huffington Post.
Yeah, but that's pretty.
But they come from all over. I mean,
Yeah.
the Huffington Post allows people to write anything, and here it was just stuck in there. This just sort of cute home economics article about, hey, when you get your party together, you could have medicated buffalo wings, or they're not even saying medicated. They don't need medicated.
They don't say medicated. They
pot
just
brownies.
pot brownies and pot chicken wings.
It's going to be a hell of a time. And the funny thing is that this marijuana bowl is going to be played in New Jersey.
Yeah, where
with,
our favorite Christie person is at.
We just this guy's horrible. Before we get on to Christie, though, because I think Christie's going to launch us into another topic. The other thing that was going on that comes back to a story that we were following here on Talking Marijuana was in Colorado. There was a guy that was fired from Verizon. He was a paraplegic, performing his job perfectly well, always in attendance at his job, no problem from the company in how he was doing his job, but he medicated with marijuana, and they fired him. That was just a zero tolerance policy they had, and the fact that he was doing his job well, could perform it, and he was a paraplegic, they didn't care about any of that. They just fired him. And he appealed the case, he lost the appeal, and went on to the Supreme Court of Colorado, and the Supreme Court has been dragging their feet for about 6 months now. Well, just the other day, they've taken up the case, and they are going to look at 2 questions at the heart of the firing of Brandon Coates. And one of the questions is, does Colorado's lawful activities statute protect medical marijuana patients from being fired if they are not impaired at work? I don't know what Colorado's lawful activities statute is, but it sounds like if you're doing lawful things, which marijuana is lawful in Colorado now, you should not be able to be fired unless you're impaired at your work. And the other question they're going to follow is, does Colorado's constitutional provision for medical marijuana give registered users a right to cannabis? So this is a major move from the Supreme Court, and it could impact workers all over the country, and it's something I know ACE has been working on in the past. Freedom from harassment in the workplace. This is a huge thing, and we're very happy for Brandon Coates, who deserves his day in court.
He was he's a medical marijuana patient as well,
absolutely.
correct? Yes. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, they really screwed him on that, and I'm glad that they're going to look at it again, because that's not fair.
In most states, the medical marijuana laws only protect people from criminal prosecution. There are some exceptions, of course. Colorado has some civil protection, and some of the other states But it's really not all that common for medical marijuana laws to protect you, say, in employment, parental rights, custody and visitation, for instance, housing. People can be denied housing, or they can be denied the right to cultivate or use their medicine in housing if it's a rental house.
Yes.
And in access to healthcare, which is really a serious one. I know we're going to talk a bit about organ transplants later, but whether it be organ transplants or pain medicine, patients are really subject to some discrimination and lack of equal access to healthcare. So I'm glad the Supreme Court is taking that up. We lost a battle in California over employment because the court, again, took the narrowest possible interpretation of the law and said there was no protection.
We also lost the battle because of politics, if I recall. It was when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor, and he said he was just he just blanketly was going to veto anything that the legislation brought to him that time.
You know what? That was going on. Governor Schwarzenegger just announced he was going to veto everything that year, except his pet projects.
Because he wanted to goose the legislators to do things, and so, yeah.
Well, but you know what? I don't think that's what happened with our bill, and I'll tell you why. Most of the bills that got vetoed in his blanket veto year, this was back in 2008, had the same thing, saying the governor's vetoing the bills and here's his political explanation, except ours. They actually wrote a special objection, a special veto statement with the bill, saying that California law doesn't protect you from discrimination in employment, ergo you can do it. So
wow.
I think the governor, that was, he's a notorious Republican and was an opponent of medical cannabis, and frankly, just a terrible governor.
Well, we have to, I just have to say, though, that before he left office, literally the week he left office, he signed the bill decriminalizing marijuana generally in California. So now if you're not a patient, if you're just a normal citizen and you have up to an ounce of marijuana on you, you only get a little citation of a ticket written for you.
I think that he kind of took the wind out of the sails of Prop 19 by doing that, because when he did that, people said, why do we have to legalize for? If you have less than an ounce, then you only get a ticket, and who needs more than an ounce? And so I really do think that he screwed us on that.
It's like medical, people are content now.
Well, the good thing is that all of his movies since leaving governorship have failed miserably, and I think they will continue to fail because now he's just old, and he's not can't be the action hero he was.
He's got to be the Smokinator.
Goodbye, Mr. Smokinator.
Mr. Smokinator.
Then he'd sell some movies.
Where was I going with that?
We were talking patients' rights.
Patients' rights. And then, okay, in New Jersey, can we talk about New Jersey? Let's talk about New Jersey.
Let's go.
Mr. Christie, whom, oh my God, he has become my favorite person in the whole world, Every time I open up something, he's on there. He vetoed the bill for transplant discrimination in New Jersey last week. And so that's really sad. Not only does he not let the children have
Does he give a reason?
Transplant discrimination, that means that if you're a medical marijuana, or if you use marijuana and you're up for a transplant, you're on the list and they test you and you've used marijuana, they take you off the list. And here in California, people have died because they've been taken off the list because of their use of medical marijuana. And it's a very near and dear to my heart because I'm a transplant recipient. And I've been told that I won't be transplanted because of my medical marijuana use. And in the last few months, I actually was admitted to the hospital. When I was let go, they actually recommended that I use marijuana. So Don and I have been working very hard.
Wait, say that again?
Yeah.
They told you won't be able to get a transplant because you use marijuana, but you're sick, so here, go home and smoke marijuana.
Well, no, 6 months ago, 5 years ago, they told me, your use of medical marijuana will stop you from being transplanted again. But 6 months ago, I was in the hospital. When they discharged me, they actually told me that I should go home and use marijuana. And so Don and I...
Are you going to do something down in Sacramento?
We're going to Sacramento.
Yes. Let's take a little break, because I want to hear in detail what you're going to go do down in Sacramento and for this liver transplant legislation. We're going to take a little break, come back, and really find out what's going to go on in Sacramento this year for liver transplant patients.
For transplant discrimination, not just liver. Yeah.
All right, let's take a break.
All right.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
And we are back with Talking Marijuana with your hosts Barry and Yami and Don in Sacramento and Aaron, our guest host this week. And we were talking transplant legislation that might be moving through. And Don, I'm just going to turn it over to you and hear what you and Yami are up to.
Sure. Well, as Yami was saying before the break, there's a terrible problem in California and other states, and this is going to come up in medical and non-medical states. It's that, if you use a medical cannabis, lawfully use it. If you test positive for cannabis use, you can be denied an organ transplant. I was shocked to learn when we started to look into this that there's very little regulation about organ transplants. Now, I can't say there's none. There is a section of the Health and Safety Code that deals with it, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But doctors and hospitals have very broad latitude in who gets on the list, who can be the beneficiary of an anatomical gift, and who ultimately stays on that list. And so it's a terrible calculus to do, and I do feel bad for doctors who have to make those kind of terrible life and death decisions. But the taking on medical cannabis and legal cannabis dates back to the time when cannabis was an illegal drug, a drug of abuse. That's how it was regarded under the law. And so if you are using illegal drugs, if you're a drug addict and a drug abuser, they have traditionally removed you from the organ transplant list, from the waiting list, because they figure your survivability is lower and you're not taking care of yourself, and therefore someone else who has a better chance should get that gift. Now, there's also some morality involved here. There's some moral judgment as well, because most people, I think, would agree that just because someone has a drug problem doesn't mean they should die. So there's definitely a moral angle to this that has not been fully vetted in the public. But what we're saying at this point in history is that medical cannabis is legal. In fact, it's good medicine that's helping Yami and other people to stay alive and to prosper and to be well. And so with medical cannabis use, or in states where cannabis use itself is legal, that should not be an automatic disqualification for an organ transplant, because this is life-saving therapy. And Yami mentioned people have died. We've had members of Americans for Safe Access who have died because they've been kicked off the list because they tested positive for medical cannabis use. And the answer we get back is, sorry, that's policy. And that's not okay.
That's not okay.
Yami, your friend here in Sacramento was very helpful. He looked up the Health and Safety Code and brought it to me. And it turns out this already exists in California law, and I'll bet it exists in a lot of other states too. California law already says that you can't be denied your place on the list. You can't be removed from the transplant process based on your physical or mental disability.
Wow.
That's already in our law. And so there's a super easy fix for the state of California on this. And what we're going to ask lawmakers to do, we've already been shopping around in the legislature for lawmakers to introduce a new bill. I'm calling it the Medical Marijuana Patients Organ Transplant Act of 2014. If somebody has a shorter name, let me know. And what we want to do is we want to just add to that section about mental and physical disability, just two little sections that say that just because you test positive for medical cannabis use, or you're a legal patient, you haven't tested positive, that by itself, that alone is not grounds to be removed from the organ transplant list. Now, our draft bill actually preserves the rights of a doctor and a surgeon consulting together to remove somebody based on any medical criteria. So if there's a scientific or a clinical criteria and that involves medical cannabis use, we're not going to step on the doctor's toes. They went to medical school, they know best, and we're not going to step on that. But if there's not a clinical criteria, we're just going to make it illegal. You can't discriminate on physical disability, mental disability, or medical cannabis use.
As it should be.
And that's exactly how it should be. And I really feel like this should be an easy one for the state legislators to get behind, because while there aren't very many people who are suffering in this and in jeopardy because of this, the consequences are so severe. So there may be a few dozen people in this situation around the state of California right now, and of those few dozen people, I don't know how many are medical cannabis patients. We don't have that data, but every single one of them could be a jeopardy to die. And so the consequences are high, even if the numbers are low. So I've been in touch with the California Medical Board just this week to start talking about it, because we want to make sure the doctors know we don't want to step on their toes. And we're talking to lawmakers. Yami's on her way here next week. She's going to come stay at my house, and we're going to go visit the lawmakers, and we're going to go door to door, and we're going to find an author for this thing, and we're going to get up for a vote. And I think we can do it this year. I really feel like everyone I talk to is like, duh, of course you should get.
Great work on that. That's just amazing. And
Thank you, Don, for helping me get this going, and or both of us together. But you know that I feel like you're working for me. You're not letting me die. So thank you, baby.
Thank you, Don.
So it is past time. I know this takes so long. It's so frustrating, and when time is of the essence, it can seem like forever. You know, I worked on employment discrimination every year starting in 2008 up until last year. And it took, those things take a really, really long time.
Take a long time.
We're going to do this one faster.
It seems like we're getting, just as a trend, it seems as if we're getting a little bit more Republican help. That somehow the tide has turned. They see the inevitability of this. I think they also see their constituents wanting this and gaining medically from this. Certainly parents and their children have become a large topic in many states. And we're starting to hear many prominent Republicans start to come out and be a little bit more in favor. And I think when that happens, we might just see things move even faster than they're moving now, which is awesome.
When you have someone like Mr.
I'll interject. Oh, sorry, Yami, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you see someone like Mr. Perry from Texas, almost endorsing it, you're just like, oh my God, we're here. We've arrived.
Yeah, but their talk show hosts have not followed suit yet. If you've seen Nancy Grace,
but
even Chris
weird.
Matthews,
These people are all on the wrong side of history.
They
We're
sure
all
are.
finding that out very quickly now, because
really
history
bad.
is moving very quickly.
I feel like now if someone brings up anything against cannabis, they almost look like crazy Nancy Grace.
Yeah,
so it's like
Nancy
they're
Grace
kind of
is
setting
crazy.
the tone of.
To follow up on what you said about these Republicans, last year when the state legislature recessed and we had the bill that never got passed for state regulations in California, Republican staffers told me, they said, it would be totally different if we ever heard from anybody in our district on this topic. Let me put in my usual plug. For God's sake, speak up, especially if you have a Republican. People say, oh, my Republican representative in Congress or the state legislature will never listen. You never know. Speak up. I mean, hell, Texas, I was born and raised there. I never thought we'd hear this in Texas.
Right. It is pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing.
We've had a couple of, before we get to our dope of the week, which is a doozy this week. Before we get to dope of the week, there were a couple of lighthearted, wonderful news things that went on. And they kind of went on maybe a week ago. We didn't really have a chance for them last week. And I just wanted to mention a couple of them. One very cute, funny article that I came across was in Colorado on the highway, their 420-mile marker.
Oh, yeah, that's cute.
It just says 420. You know how you're driving around the highway and it'll say, 319. You're at the 319-mile marker. Well, the 420-mile marker had been stolen so many times that they decided to change the number to 419.99 so that it wouldn't get stolen. And I just thought that was really an amazing thing for the state to have to do.
Every time they put one up, someone would come by and steal it. So
and I would imagine that 419.99 is going to get stolen just as many times because it's too funny that they had to do that. So that one really brought sort of a laugh to me. And also, in Colorado, at the airports, they've installed
I want to apply for this job. I'm going to be the first one to apply for this job.
I think in the article they say this job is not up for grabs for anybody, but basically the Colorado Springs Airport recently installed 3 green metal containers in the terminal where travelers can deposit marijuana, which is legal to buy in Colorado, but banned at the airport. The people at the airport, the people that run the airport, don't want travelers to dump bags of pot into the trash bins, and for that reason they've installed amnesty boxes at the airport and a spokesman for the airport said the boxes will be monitored 24 hours a day with Colorado Springs police responsible for emptying the boxes and destroying the drugs inside.
Destroying them.
I see a weekly party happening in Colorado.
Well, it's legal.
It's
So,
legal.
I mean,
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
legal.
the only other place I've ever seen that is in Amsterdam. The Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. They have amnesty boxes.
Oh my God! It was just so hysterical
funny, I know.
that they would do that.
The other thing that happened this week, but the day after the last podcast, was that Mr. Obama came out and said that marijuana wasn't as bad, or not. What alcohol? What did he
talked
say?
about that a little bit
No,
last
last
week.
week. No, we didn't,
Yeah,
because he
we
hadn't
talked-
said it.
Yeah,
He
we
hadn't.
did.
He said he didn't say it till afterwards.
We went over the repercussions of it last week. But in any case, there's been many repercussions about that. And
well, Michelle Leonhardt,
talking
gaining on him
shit
about it.
against
and now
him.
they
I
wanna-
know.
Yeah, fired.
that bleeds into our dope of the week, and our dope of the week for sure, which is fine, is our
Michelle
DEA
Leonhardt.
administrator, Michelle Leonhardt, who just opens her mouth and shit spews out. She is really a hard line, no care person. Just I'm the head of the DEA, and I'm going to just follow blindly
she's
whatever we say. So
she's so embarrassed. The most embarrassing moment of her life was when she realized that she had made a speech under a flag that was made out of hemp.
Yeah.
That's so stupid
Well,
of her.
did you see the other
Oh my
DEA head
God.
guy said a bunch of crazy stuff too in Congress? He went on a belligerent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he looked like such a buffoon. I mean, but
what was
he's
his name? Yeah, when he. I know
Yep,
what you're
that
talking
was
about.
really
I wish
bad,
we
too.
had that. That was what I mailed you that I didn't attach.
So
Yeah, but now there's the changes are caused to fire Michelle Leonhardt. It's going viral. Everybody wants her gone.
Yeah, I think they needed a
Yeah,
certain
petition.
amount of. By the time I signed this petition to fire Michelle Leonhardt online, I think they only needed about 2,700 more signatures, which I'm sure they'll find. And that doesn't guarantee that she'll be fired.
No.
I'm sure she won't be fired. But here she spoke out against her boss this week. Are you aware?
Yeah, bad form.
Yeah, really bad form. She spoke out against her boss. She is embarrassed that American flags are made of hemp, which our Representative Paulus
Didn't
from
George Washington
Yes.
under hemp?
Representative Paulus from Colorado, who's been a leading advocate for marijuana reform, observes that many of the founding fathers, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, grew hemp, and some of the first American flags were made of hemp. And he wonders if Michelle Leonhardt is embarrassed by Betsy Ross, Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington. She is disgusting. I mean,
sure
literally,
is.
without any kind of, I understand people don't like it, and I'm happy to hear and take on their arguments and have a real debate about the situation. But this woman is simply not interested in any facts, any science. She was incredibly embarrassed before the Senate Judiciary Committee when she couldn't even say the words that marijuana was less harmful than heroin and cocaine. She was asked repeated times by Representative Paulus in her grilling before Congress. And if you want to look it up, I'm sure you can find it
you
on
can send
YouTube. Michelle Leonhardt, and you will see how embarrassing this woman, who is in a position of power, real power, is to the United States.
It's embarrassing that
She
she
should
could
know.
get into that position as ignorant and non-progressive as she is.
Well, she's a tool. She'll sit up there and do it and not answer questions, and that's
I
just
think
what they
it's
want.
her job, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the parameters of her job that there's no way she can admit to the benefits.
Well,
or
It's like admitting a crime.
There is actually a law adopted by Congress that says that the director of the DEA and the ONDCP, that's the Office of National Drug Control Policy, cannot advocate for the legalization of marijuana.
So there's a law
There's a
on
law
the books
that
that
says
allows her.
That is not what's holding her back.
Oh, really?
No.
She is a true crusader and a believer in prohibition and in prosecution. And, talk about the wrong side of history. Our dope of the
Yeah.
week is a dinosaur.
No, she's going to go down
dinosaur.
as Henry Oslinger. She's going to have
her
in
and that
history.
chick from
She's going
Florida.
to.
What's her name? Bonnie, the one.
I forget her name.
No.
Pam Bondi.
Pam Bondi,
These people
yeah.
that are against this are truly going to go down in history as the Simon Legree, the bad apple, the example of real overreach by ideology and government, and she is going to go down that way. And she's writing her own history book. Poor lady.
I don't feel sorry for her. Hell no. She can eat everything.
I say
that
when she
eats.
loses her job, we send her a big fat joint so she can relax.
That's right.
And enjoy life a little
Well, a
bit.
DEA agent did leave the DEA and
Oh,
started
yeah.
working for a medical marijuana firm.
Yeah, we've talked about him.
Oh, good.
We've
Yeah.
talked about him quite a
New
bit.
jobs are being created in the cannabis industry, so she could maybe get a job at one of the dispensaries in Colorado.
That's right.
So Michelle Leonhardt, our definite
Dope of the
dope of the week. Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in and listening to us talk about marijuana. We'll be back next week to talk about marijuana, and we won't ever stop talking about
That's
marijuana. Pura vida.
Pura vida.
Pura vida.
Adios.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.